Thank you all for being with us on this ninth night of December 2021. I am your Imam for this evening, also known as Instructor Benjamin Bilal. And we're going to be going over some considerable information that I believe to be not only enlightening, but maybe even life-saving. And if you're not understanding how important that is right now, hopefully after you've heard what it is we have to say tonight, you'll agree. What we're doing today actually marks the beginning of a chapter of broadcasting, which I am calling WDM Central. The letters WDM Central. And in the future, you'll be able to come to this conference or possibly to its sister webinar under the same name, WDM Central, and receive all things WD Mohammed. Now, when I say WD Mohammed, I'm not talking about wasting your time just playing a bunch of videos and a bunch of audios and remembering, all of what we used to be back then in the day. That's not what I'm talking about. If after all of these decades of bathing in the luxury of the language of Imam W Mohammed, we can go into his language and environment and begin pulling out wisdom that we can now build upon, extrapolate from, and even give more of the details pertaining to, then we're not really worthy of being in that language's environment, because we're not doing it any more than what our tape recorders can do or what our video players can do. We can just play back what was recorded word for word without any explanation, any further elaboration, any connections in the logic. Well, my tape recorder can do that. I don't need to sit and listen to you for 2 and 3 hours for that to happen. But if you're one of those people, and there's a growing number of people now who can actually go into Imam W.D. Muhammad's language and choose certain terms, choose certain phrases, certain mantras even that he used, and then bring us even more gold out of those hills or out of those caves. This is what Imam W.D. Muhammad was praying for. And I'm asking Allah to make this study that we call Nunetics the primo study for doing exactly that. Not only looking at his language, but looking into his language. And as I said, we should be able to extrapolate much more than he left us with, in so much as he told us that he was leaving us with hints and clues, and that his real students would follow him up with the details. So we're here to present to you some of those details. So if you're not familiar with the Nunetics, if you're not familiar with Instructor Benjamin Bilal, this is the night for you. Now, let me just say this as a disclaimer. If you are one of those people who suffers from having a short attention span, then this teleconference is not for you. I do not want to waste your time. I do not want to take you away from doing something that you might get more emotional benefit from, or, more stimulation out of, or whatever, it is you're used to doing. But if you suffer from a short attention span, either discipline yourself enough to just listen and stay with us and maybe take some notes and write down some keywords and maybe ask a couple of questions at the end of this call, or just hang up and don't waste your time and don't waste our time. Because I'm not the person to placate short attention spans. In this day and time, my friends, we cannot afford to have any lazy minds attached to these teachings. You will only hurt yourself. So go find a good piece of enjoyable entertainment and keep yourself occupied with that. These calls are for mature minds only. Mature minds only. And as I have said in previous classes, the word mature is exactly the same word as nature. Mature or mature is just another way of expressing what nature represents. The letters M and N are interchangeable throughout multiple languages. So if you want to know what it is to truly be mature in your thinking, in your attitude, in your emotionality, yet that maturity is dependent on your keen observation of what is taking place in nature or nature. Some call her Mother Nature. If you're not paying attention to Mother Nature, your mind, your emotionality, even your instincts will never really become sharp, never really become mature. They will always remain on an undisciplined and underdeveloped level of expression. So remember that. Nature and mature are the same word. And nature is the English word for what the Qur'an calls al-fitra, the fitra. What is the fitra? In essence, the fitra is the conscious observation of what is taking place in nature on the primary levels of form, meaning how things look, how they present themselves to the eye, and also function, meaning how they actually operate on the inside. Everything that Allah has created, He has created it upon the platforms of form and function. If I give you a seed, place it in your hand, there's a particular form that you become readily familiar with, the shape of the seed. But if I ask you what that seed contains inside of it, you might not be able to answer that unless you know what a lemon seed or an apple seed or a watermelon seed looks like. Then you may be able to say, well, that's going to be a patch of watermelons right there. But you still might not be able to tell me exactly what the process is by which that seed will be able to sprout forth and germinate and produce that field of watermelons or lemon trees, orange groves, or whatever that seed happens to be. Because the internal activity taking place within a seed is its functionality. And whenever something ceases to be functional, we call it dysfunctional. And that's true for a seed that's not able to bring forth its potential, but it is also true for a human being who is not able to bring forth her or his potential. You might look good in your form. You might be what I believe the Commodores, I was corrected the other day. The Commodores called her a brick house. She's mighty, mighty. She's letting it all hang out. See, they are preoccupied with form, F-O-R-M, but they know diddly squat about how that woman is supposed to be operating as a functional female on this earth. The responsibilities that Allah has created as a potential within her for motherhood, for sisterhood, for daughterhood, for community development, etc., for operating as a functional mind in that community, or at least in that family group. She knows nothing about that. She's interested only in squandering her looks and her body and her form by allowing even strangers in the public to be able to experience her on the level of form. But in doing so and placing this over amount of attention on her form, she is also lending to the dissipation of her functionality, and therefore she becomes dysfunctional. And you can only become dysfunctional when you're not paying attention to the fitra. If you're not paying attention to the fitra, then you cannot be paying attention to nature itself. And if you're not paying attention to nature, we repeat, there's no way in the world you're going to be able to mature, because nature and mature are exactly the same concept. Man, I could almost hang up and be satisfied with what I've given you so far as study, but we're going to continue. So again, keep in mind these calls are for mature minds only. And what we teach is designed to give you your brains back. This is not entertainment. This is inner attainment. Now, tonight we're going to begin by discussing a word called etymology. And for those of you who are taking notes, etymology is spelled ETYMOLOGY. Etymology, etymology. And that prefix ETYM means the true meaning of this particular study. Etymology is the true meanings of words and where words come from. And this prefix etym is actually a play on the word atom, A-T-O-M. And etymology is supposed to be giving you the atomic meaning for words. Most people don't know that words have an anatomy and an atomic structure, just like the atom. Science has since discovered that the atom is not the smallest unit in creation. That's what the science used to believe before they developed keener microscopes and such. Now we know that there are protons, neutrons, and electrons making up that atomic matter. And we know that you can go even further down in terms of studying the atom, and those protons and neutrons and electrons are going to manifest as quarks and even other more subatomic particles that science didn't know existed before they were able to develop the proper tools in order to reach that level of scientific investigation. So it's the same thing with words. The development of etymology does not mean that the meanings that they give you in an etymology dictionary are going to be the nitty-gritty last word on words. Etymology is not the smallest of linguistic breakdowns for words. The smallest breakdown for a word is when you can trace a word back to the seed letters, back to its seed letters. And it is the seed letters which produced the root words that then give us our vocabulary. We call this science nunetics. That's spelled capital N-U, capital N-E-T-I-C-S, and is pronounced nunetics. What is nunetics? That word was coined based on the Arabic letter nun. You can spell that letter N-U-N, or you can spell it N-O-O-N, or any other phonetic word that suits your fancy, as long as you pronounce it correctly as noon, just like the sun that's high up in the sky around 12 o'clock. We call it noon. It's the same pronunciation. So this linguistic science is called nunetics, and it is a gift from our source creator to us, talking about us common folk, who have been historically kept out of the linguistic circles of information. When people off of the continent of what's called Africa were brought here, in many cases for chattel slavery, one of the first things that the people who wanted to rule over us needed to do was to separate us by language, making sure that we were not partnered up with people who we could actually communicate with. And some of the more serious violations of that were met with the actual removal of the physical tongue from the physical mouth. So wouldn't it make sense to you that because God is a just God, as we say, that in this restoration process, that one of the first things we be given back as a people is our ability to communicate with each other? And God has done it so sophisticatedly that he's not only given us the ability to speak properly in terms of our English or Spanish or whatever language we happen to be born into, but he has also now given us insight into the subatomic configuration of words and even letters. That's what the nunetics is. It's an investigation into the seed letter properties of words. Now, There are many Muslims, and I know we have more than just Muslims proper listening to this teleconference, but I'm speaking to Muslims right now. There are many Muslims who believe themselves to be obligated to learn the language of Arabic once they become Muslim for purposes of more properly reading the book that was revealed in Arabiya or Arabic called the Qur'an. So Muslims feel obligated to take an Arabic course, and when you sit down in that Arabic class, one of the first things they're going to teach you are root words. Arabic root words. Now, if you listen carefully to the terms that are used when discussing language, you're going to see that many of the terms are also terms that you find in botany, and that would be the study of how plants grow, plant life, horticulture, agriculture. Many of the terms that are used, I repeat, in learning language are terms that were adopted from the lexicon of plant growth, how plants grow. Plants grow roots. We have root words in language, but plants also grow roots. However, roots do not just pop up and appear in the field. Roots are actually the result of an activity that took place prior to the manifestation of those roots. That's called planting the seed. All of us know these things. It's elementary. Planting the seed. We have to prepare the soil. We have to prepare a place for the seed to be deposited, most likely beneath the top level of soil, called the topsoil. And then we have to make sure that there are certain conditions present in order to activate the potential within the seed's possibilities, what we earlier called functionality. So we put the form of the seed in the ground, but now we have to do what's necessary in order for the functionality of the seed to become activated. And the best we can do is plant the seed and maybe give it some water. The rest of it, we have to depend on our source creator for the rest of that action. The sunlight, we can't bring it that. The air or oxygen, we can't bring that to the soil. We couldn't even bring the soil. We had to depend on the source creator for all of the above and then pray that we end up with a healthy harvest. Well, it's the same thing with understanding the importance of language or communication, linguistics. It's the same thing. If you want to more accurately understand how language works and what words are actually conveying, you're going to have to go beyond the root word formation that's fed to you in these courses on the learning of language. And again, I'm still speaking specifically to Muslims who learned Arabic. You might be a master of the Arabic pronunciation, but it doesn't mean that you're a master of how to detect and protect the integrity of the original meanings for Arabic words. The protection of those original meanings has been given to us not necessarily in the Arabic language per se, because many of those nuances have been lost, but they have been recaptured or regathered by our source creator and represented through the pages of the Qur'an itself. The Qur'an and its Arabic lexicon represents the preservation of the integrity of the original meanings for those Arabic sounds, those Arabic glyphs, those Arabic words, and those Arabic phrases. The Qur'an, I repeat, captures the integrity of the original meanings for those words. Within the concept that we're discussing called the nunetics, we also have the science of what is called consonantal connections. Now, don't confuse that with continental. We're not talking about Asia, Africa, China, Europe, etc. We're talking about consonants, not continents. And as we should know, a consonant is to be contrasted with a vowel, and a vowel is an open-mouthed sound. A, E, I, O, U for English, and for Arabic, A, E, U. Those three vowels and their elongations. All vowels are open-mouthed sounds where the mouth is not in touch with any other part of itself. Listen carefully. A vowel is an open-mouthed sound where no part of the mouth can touch another part of the mouth. So when you say ah, there's nothing touching anything in terms of the mouth itself. But if I give you a consonant such as T, all consonants demand that you touch parts of the mouth and put one part of the mouth in touch with another part of the mouth. There has to be contact in the mouth for it to be a consonant. So T is the result of my tongue pressing off the back of my top two front teeth to say T. You can do it where you are, you're muted. Or to say D, my tongue has to also touch the back of my top two front teeth to say D. Or B, my two lips have to come together, top and bottom, to say B. Or P, S. The front of my mouth has to come together. K, the back of my throat has to thrust that particular sound forward. And it's the same for all consonants. Now, the Arabic language claims to be all consonantal. Even the first letter, alif, which is an A sound, that A sound has to also come from the back of the throat, which makes it a consonant and not a vowel. It's called a guttural because it comes from the gutter or the back of the throat in the same way that the heavy ha sound, H sound does, or the ka sound in K or kaf in Arabic. These are sounds that come from the back of the throat, like qaf, the letter for Q. Qaf comes from the back of the throat. So these are consonants. Now, what do we mean by consonantal connections? The human being is only able to produce sound from 7 different parts of the mouth. 7 different parts. It doesn't matter what language you speak. It can be Chinese, it can be Kiswahili, it can be French, it doesn't matter. All languages are the result of the mouth's ability to pronounce 7 basic sounds from 7 parts of the mouth. We're not going to get into the nitty-gritty of that. You'll learn that along the way. Suffice it to say that because different letters have been invented based on those 7 different parts of the mouth, the letters that occupy the same space or the same part of the mouth are going to be interchangeable. They're going to be interchangeable. So let's go back to the example of the guttural in the letter ha, like hayya ala salah for you Muslims. That hayya, that ha sound, that H sound is a guttural, but so is the K sound, ka, ka. So that means that there are going to be words that contain that H sound that can actually be interchanged with a different word that carries the K sound, or the qaf sound, the Q sound, or any other sound that comes from that particular part of the human mouth, of which, I repeat, there are only 7 parts of the mouth that can produce sound. So I hope that it wasn't too confusing. And if you want to know more about that, I'll tell you how to get yourself a quick copy of the book called Nunetics, Fitra-based meanings for Arabic words in the Quran, particularly if you're interested in reading the Quran more appropriately and with a better understanding. You need to get yourself a copy of the book called Nunetics. And again, we'll tell you how to do that at the end of this teleconference. So some of what I'm going to say today is going to involve this science that we call Nunetics, particularly as it relates to consonantal connections. And I'll give you a quick introduction to that based on words that you might already be familiar with in both English and Arabic. The science of consonantal connections tend to bring us letters or even combinations of letters that carry what I call underlying themes. So for instance, if you have the combination of letters S and L, for instance, and I'm sure off of the top of your head, you can think of at least 3 or 4 or 5 maybe words that you already know in English or Arabic that carry the S-L sound, such as the English word salt, S-A-L-T. It carries the S and the L within the word. Now, if you find a different word, it doesn't matter the language. If you find a different word that carries those same 2 sounds, the S sound and the L sound, and I'll give you another quick for instance, in the Qur'an, as you know, there's a word called a salah. Some say salat. It also carries the S-L sound within its word. So that means, according to the logic of Nunetics, that the word salt and the word salat are going to have related meanings because they share the same, I call it language DNA composition. Language also has a DNA composition. That's why they call languages family groups, because they act and react in exactly the same way that genetic families do. The further away you mix and match, the further away those generations are going to be from you. So it might not end up being your sibling, but it might end up being your cousin, or it might end up being your second cousin, or it might end up being your fourth cousin on your mother's brother's uncle's side. But nevertheless, somewhere in your genes, you're sharing their group experience. And language is exactly the same way. So although English is far removed from what you see to be Arabic, Arabic and English are still related languages, even if they're not from the same direct family called the Romance languages or the Germanic languages. Arabic is from the Afro-Asiatic family of languages, but it still is going to be related to English because all languages come out of one root system. And the Bible and the Qur'an tells you so, that humans began as one humanity on this planet. They verged out into various parts of the planet to do their thing for however many thousands and millions of years that they were doing their thing. And Allah says that at one point, humanity is going to become one again. And I see that effort towards oneness as being represented first and foremost in the uniting of language. That has to happen first. If we can't communicate with each other, we're not going to be able to get along if we don't understand each other. And Nunetics, I repeat, is the best way that I have discovered of allowing you to keep your own respective pronunciation and words and language, but still have an understanding of what the next culture is saying, or what the next tribe is saying, or what the next geography is saying, because you can identify with the understanding that's related to those 7 different parts of the mouth and what they mean thematically or essentially. Not exactly, but thematically. So if you have the word salt and you have the word salat and they both contain the S and the S and the L must mean something that both of those words can agree to. And the S and the L in all words, listen carefully, the S and the L sound in all words that carry those 2 letters in that order represents the preservation of that thing's integrity. The preservation of the integrity of a thing. So as we know, before the days of refrigeration, the seafarers would carry humongous amounts of meats and fish, and they needed a way to preserve the integrity of that meat or that fish. So they would pack it in salt. See, it's not like today where you think about salt as that little shaker on your dinner table, you know. That's not how they saw salt. They saw salt as the number one preservative or preserver of the integrity of a thing, the freshness of a thing. Now, if you can understand that about salt, then you're ready to hear this next fact. And that is that the word salt, the English word S-A-L-T, actually comes out of the Quranic word S-A-L-A-T, salat. This is by their own admission that they named it salt because they saw salt as doing the exact same thing that was salat was designed to do in the life of the Muslim practitioner. And that is preserve the integrity of the Muslim life. You see how beautiful that is and how easy that is to explain? Whatever salt is doing, salat is doing. Now let's look at another SL sound. Let's look at the economic term sell, S-E-L-L. When I go to the grocery store and they sell me some items, I purchase those items. In exchange, I give them my money. They give me the product or the produce. So there's an exchange, but what is that exchange doing? In essence, it's preserving the integrity of the relationship between the buyer and the seller. It preserves our relationship. That's why we go back to the same store over and over and over again, because the integrity of that relationship has been preserved through that interaction. So let's add another underlying theme to these letters SL. And that other underlying theme is the idea of exchange. Exchange. Let's look at another word. The same sound, sell, but spelt with a C. C-E-L-L. What is the cell doing? You know, you have trillions of them in your body. They make up your body, about 300 trillion, I believe they say. Cells make up your individual human body. What are those cells doing? They are maintaining and preserving the integrity of your biology. They are fending off offensive materials that are trying to enter into the center of the cell, into the nucleus of the cell, in order to feed on the cell or develop some type of cancerous something. And your cell has been created by the source creator with an intelligence that is able to detect that which is injurious or possibly harmful and shut itself down. The cell has the ability to actually close its doors, so to speak, so that the injurious materials cannot enter into the nucleus. It can only swim itself around the membrane, the outer shell of the cell. And when the danger is no longer in that vicinity, the cell has the intelligence created by its source creator to open up and begin to accept nutrition all over again. But the cell will shed out even the nutrition if it feels as though it's being bombarded with a situation that's going to cause its demise and its ultimate death. So what is that cell doing? I repeat, it's preserving the integrity of the life force that Allah created within that cell. Again, preserving the integrity of a thing. Let's go on to the English word soul, S-O-U-L. What is your soul doing? Your soul is preserving the integrity of its relationship with its source creator. The soul has an obligation to whatever that is that created it, whatever that is that fashioned it, whatever that is that gave it its nutrition, that gave it its marching orders in the form of its DNA and RNA construct, sending messages all of the time, how to do, what to do, when to do, how to grow, how to improve. The soul is given these instructions also on the spiritual level. And it's given these instructions for purposes of preserving the integrity of the relationship between the soul and its maker. Beautiful when you understand it, isn't it? Even if I gave you a multisyllabic word like reconciliation, you see how long that word is? Oh, we run from some of these long words, but there's no need, because all of these words in any language can be broken down A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, if you know where to chop, 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 chop. And Nunetics is showing you how to master the chopping up of a word until you can get to its essence or its root word. Here's where root words become very important. If you give me a word like reconciliation, then I have to then put in some work, some study time, and begin to study what are called the fixes or the affixes. AFFIXES, the affixes in words. What does that mean? It means that words are going to have prefixes, a prefix. A word can have an infix in the middle of the word, meaning letters that are placed there that are not a natural part of the root word itself. And words can also have a suffix. So these are the affixes that you can place in words or on words. So let's look at where these things exist in the word reconciliation. The RE is actually a prefix. That's not a part of the original word. So take the RE off of reconciliation and it leaves you with conciliation. Now let's look at the CON in conciliation. That's not a part of the original root either. So you take off the CON, it's an infix. It is placed within the broader word called reconciliation. So you take the re off, that's the prefix, take the con off, that's the infix. Now you have ciliation, which is not an actual word. Now let me show you how English plays games. Why Mr. W.D. Farad called English a language of tricknology. All right. So we have ciliation. That's not a word. Now let's look at the end of the word where you see the ION, ciliation. You see TION, but it's the ION that is actually the suffix of the word reconciliation. It's the suffix, the ending part of the word. Now you might say, well, I thought it was the TION. Never. It's never the TION. It's always the eon or the ion, because that's a part of the science of the English language where they hide coded messages that they teach to their children and their grandchildren, and your children and grandchildren are left dumbfounded or dumbed down, thinking that this word has no power, no real meaning except what they told me or what the dictionary gave me. That's not true. We're going to dispel those misnomers tonight. So the ION is the suffix. So what's left? You have CILAT. CILAT. Silat? Starting to sound familiar, Muslims? Yeah, you have something that if it were a word, it would compare with the word salat. Silat? From reconciliation? This is how they hide their wisdom. Now, the T in this construction serves exactly the same purpose as what Arabic calls the ta marbuta, the feminine T. It feminizes the word. So if you don't know anything else about this word reconciliation or any other word that carries the T and then the ION, understand that that T is always serving the purpose of feminizing the word. They tell you English words don't have gender. Oh, it's not masculine, it's not feminine, it's just what it is, but that's not true. Another one of those hidden secrets held only by the people who want to rule over you through the usage of language. So the T is also the equivalent of what we call ta marbuta, the tie or the feminine T. So whatever reconciliation is, it operates on a feminine principle. That's what you should understand. Whatever imagination is, because it has that feminine T, it operates on a feminine principle. Whatever in operation is the same thing. It carries the feminine T and it operates upon a feminine principle. What do we mean by feminine principle? We mean that that concept is going to be able to be influenced by an outside agent or agency. So if it's in imagination, it means that something outside of you can come at you or into you and influence your trajectory. Just like a male germ called sperm can come or enter into a feminine ovum or feminine womb or feminine vagina and begin to create modifications within that female system. Well, it's the same thing with language. If I understand that your imagination is also feminine, it means I can come with my masculine germ, my masculine concepts, meaning concepts that are designed to enter you. And by the time all is said and done, what you're left with is not only your program, but you're also left marching to the beat of my drum. I can do that through your imagination. I can reconfigure, I can disconfigure your imagination until you think it's your thought. You think it's your thinking when in fact you have been inseminated by my masculine principled language. Yeah, that's a lot to swallow. Stay with us, be patient. So reconcile, and the SL sound in those letters C and L in ciliat. It's a C, but it's pronounced as an S. The letter C in English has no independent sound. It's going to either be a K sound or an S sound, like circus. Two C's. The first one sounds like an S, sir. The second one sounds like a K, cuss. There's no other sound for the letter C. It's one of those trick letters within the English language. So ciliat means to bring things together. Listen to me carefully. Ciliat means to preserve the relationship of two things that were intended to be together. So when you talk about reconciliation, you're talking about reconciling differences that are in the way of us expressing our natural tendency to want to be together. When you reconcile a marriage or a friendship or a business relationship, that's what you do. You're saying, we were meant to be together, man. Look at how well we were working together, and this little glitch got in the way. You know, this issue or this person got in the way. And now we have to patch up this relationship. Allah says, cursed are those who tear asunder what Allah has ordered to be joined together. Do you know what one of the words for joining together in the Quran is? Salihat. You see the SL sound at work? Alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat. But they have dumbed down the explanations for these Quranic words so much so that you cannot get the wisdom. You cannot squeeze the juice out of these Quranic words, because too many people in scholarship decided that the majority of people reading the Quran didn't need to know. Just didn't need to know. We know, the scholars know that's enough. When you need to know, you just come to us and we'll pinch off a piece of the wisdom and feed it to you every now and then. But you going into the Quran for self, are you kidding? You'll eventually take our places. We don't want that. That's what they're saying underneath their breath. They'll never tell us that out loud, but that's the case. We study for you. Really? From a book that says that each individual is responsible for deeply pondering its pages? Allah says, do they not yatadabbaru the Quran? Do they not ponder deeply? That's not talking to scholars alone. That's talking to all of us. I'm talking to no ulema. Allah is speaking to every intelligent, responsible, and maturing mind amongst the humans. So Salihat represents the preservation of the integrity of our social life and relationship. Now, if the S and the L running in that order represents the bringing together of things, the solidifying of things, you see that word solid, it also has the SL sound, right? The solidifying, bringing together of something. What you're going to find is that in many cases, if you invert those letters, you're going to come out with the opposite meaning. So if you invert the letters SL, you're going to have the LS looking at you, right? And what words do we get from the LS connection? LS signifies things which lose their integrity and become loose. Do you see the LS in lose and loose and lost and even lazy, because the Z and the S are interchangeable? So when you're lazy, you lose. Do you see the L and the S in lousy? When you do a lousy job, you might lose that job. It's an amazing thing. We're talking Nunetics, and this is just the beginning. I just wanted to whet your appetite before going into the main crux of what I wanted to speak to you concerning. We're talking tonight on this WD Mohammed Central channel, WDM Central. We're talking on Imam W.D. Mohammed and his emphasis on etymology. His emphasis on etymology. When Imam Mohammed began his teaching career in 1975, publicly speaking, he was teaching all of his life practically, but he became the leader of his father's organization called the Lost and Found Nation of Islam in the Wilderness of North America. That was its technical name. His father passed in February of 1975, and the next day, February 26th, Wallace D. Muhammad, who was then known as Supreme Minister Wallace D. Muhammad, took the leadership mantle and began to direct the followers of his father's cherished organization of members. And one of the first things he put emphasis on was language. In fact, he went as far as to emphasize letters themselves. And he was the one who first introduced us to the idea that each letter had its own meaning and significance. People think, oh, what's this Nunetic stuff? Imam Muhammad never talked about no letters speaking to us and no letters that have individual. Imam Muhammad told you that as soon as he got into office. In fact, as soon as he got back from Egypt, I believe that was 1975, or I know for sure by 1976. He had went to visit the pyramids in England, in Egypt, pardon me. And when he got back, he told us that letters have meanings, and he gave it to us in the story, although it's an apocryphal story from Christianity, that says that Jesus, as a 12-year-old, went to the temple in order to be tutored by the rabbis there. And when he got to the temple, the rabbis began to try teaching him, and they asked him to repeat after themselves. And they would say Aleph, which is the Hebrew first letter, Aleph, A-L-E-P-H. And Jesus would say Aleph. And they would give him the next letter. They would say Beth. That's the second Hebrew letter, Beth. And Jesus would say Beth. And they'd say, good, good, good boy. Now, repeat after me again. Say Gimel. And Jesus said, hold up a second. Jesus said, why are you giving me all of these letters, but you're not giving me any meanings for these letters? And do you know that Jesus, according to this Apocrypha, began to explain to them the details inherent in each one of those Hebrew letters that they were trying to teach him? And he did so in such a magnificent way that the head rabbi there said, I don't know what, I'm paraphrasing now, of course, I don't know what in the world we're doing here trying to teach this boy. He said we should be his students. Yeah, that's what they did. We should be his students. How about that? Is there nothing we can teach him? He's teaching us what we don't know. We don't know the meanings of these letters. You know who else went through that exercise? The early folks over there in Arabia who were listening to Muhammad the Prophet when he came out and said, Alif Lam Mim. Those educated minds amongst the Jews and the Christians especially, they listened to Muhammad the Prophet and they said to themselves, well, who is this uneducated guy giving us letters that we can't even understand? He must be a magician. He must be doing some hocus pocus or something, because we don't know what this Alif Lam Mim Ra and Qaf and all that and Yasin. We don't know what all of that means. So it can't be real because it didn't come through our academics. Some people have the nerve to say the same thing about Nunetics, but they're going to be very, very surprised and very, very shortly. Now, Imam Muhammad told us upon his return from Egypt He spoke on the capital letter G, and he drew it out on the board, and he was showing how it's actually the profile of the human head, with the bottom part on the right representing the poked out bottom lip. And he showed it very carefully, but very clearly. And they understood him right away. Now, that's what I call one of the hints and clues that Imam Muhammad spoke about, that he was going to leave us, that his true students had to come behind him and give you the details too. So that's what I'm doing. That's what others have attempted to do. I'm not the first one to say that letters have individual meaning, but I'm the first one to tell you that each one of those letters is tied into Allah's fitrah. I'm the first one to tell you that. I'm the first one to tell you that they can be first identified as parts of your human body. All of those letters are parts of your human body. And what those parts of the body do for you are also the activities taking place in the words that utilize those particular letters. How about that one? So if the letter Aleph represents the spine in your back, then the words, especially in the Quran, that begin with this letter Aleph, like the word for faith, Iman, Amana, they're going to operate in the word in exactly the same way, functionally, Remember we talked about functionality? They're going to operate functionally in that word in exactly, not near, but exactly the same way that the spine operates in your human back. It operates as the main support. It operates as that which keeps the body upright. I could remove an arm, I could remove a leg, but I could still stand upright. But try removing my spine and see how long I stand. In fact, not only will this body fall if injury is done to the spine, if enough damage is done to the spine, I could die altogether. Now, how's that for the explanation of one letter in the word that we have for faith? If you damage that Aleph, faith becomes null and void. If you damage the inclination in you to want to be upright, to want to be righteous, to want to be dignified, to want to be balanced upon two legs, that's what your spine allows you to do. It allows you to stand up. There's a day in the Quran called the Yawmul Qiyamah, the day of standing. Well, how you going to stand if you ain't got no spine in your back? All right. And that's just one of three consonantal roots in the word amana, which gives us iman. I didn't even touch on the meme and the noon, or the M and the N in that word. I only told you about the aleph. When you put the meme as a meaning into the word, when you follow it up with the noon and its meaning in the word, then you not only have a word, you have a sentence. That's the beauty of nunetics. That amana is not just a word. It's a sentence, because each letter, each seed letter, is already a word. Man, oh man, this is wonderful. If y'all are enjoying just the first part of what I'm saying, just open up your phone for a quick minute and let me know, and then mute your phones.
Allahu Akbar. Loving it. Alhamdulillah. Yes, alhamdulillah. Thank you.
All right. That's a good sampling. Let's continue.
Yes, enjoying it.
Yeah. Wonderful. Good to hear your voices. That energizes me. Thank you.
Alhamdulillah. Very informative.
All right. And listen, every now and then you can break in and just respond if you get a quick, if it's on you like that. And you just want to say a quick alhamdulillah, that's fine with me. All right. Now let's go a little deeper.